Mike, welcome back to the program. Obviously, you know what we're going to talk about here. You've got to be pretty frustrated by this, and I am too. I guess my question is, what's happening here exactly? Is the judge correct in that Lindsay Halligan is not rightly appointed? The floor is yours.
No, not at all. You have an Obama judge who's the chief judge on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the appellate court for the Eastern District of Virginia, where these charges were brought. Hand selected a Clinton judge from South Carolina, and this Clinton judge came in, and the fix was in to dismiss both of these indictments against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Big Tish James. The evidence is overwhelming in both cases. Remember, before Lindsay Halligan became the interim U.S. attorney for 120 days, the prior interim U.S. attorney saw this evidence and was either too cowardly or too corrupt to do anything about this. And the evidence is overwhelming. He was told good riddance, and they brought in Lindsay. They finally had to find someone with balls because the male Republican attorneys don't have balls, particularly in Washington, D.C., so they have to bring women in who have balls like Lindsay Halligan, and she got a grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia to indict both Comey and Big Tish James. Now, this is a suburb of Washington, D.C. that's loaded up with partisan Democrat operatives, and Lindsay Halligan still produced enough evidence to convince these grand juries to indict. In James Comey's case, the evidence is crystal clear that James Comey lied to Congress and obstructed a Senate investigation into Crossfire Hurricane, the biggest scandal in American history, where Obama, Biden, Hillary, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, and so many other bad actors politicized and weaponized intel agencies and law enforcement to take out their political enemies, Trump, and to help their political allies, Hillary. That is Republic ending. When you do that, that's what you do in third world Marxist hellholes. And Obama brought his third world Marxist tactics to the United States as the president of the United States. We also have overwhelming evidence that Big Tish James, who went after President Trump and tried to bankrupt him for the non-fraud of President Trump, paying back sophisticated Wall Street banks in full, on time, as agreed, with interest. Big Tish went after President Trump and said that Mar-a-Lago was only worth $18 million somehow. Mar-a-Lago, you've been there many times, Ben, is worth close to $1 billion or more. It is 20 acres of the most prime real estate on the planet. It is the only piece of property in Palm Beach that touches both the Atlantic Ocean and the intracoastal waterway. A tennis court at Mar-a-Lago is worth more than $18 million. Big Tish, as part of the Democrats' Lawfare, including Crossfire Hurricane, with Comey, tried to take out Trump with a mortgage fraud case. But guess what? Big Tish had her own mortgage fraud problem because under New York statute, she's required to live in New York. She's the attorney general. She had this second home in Virginia, but it wasn't a second home, and it was an investment property that she allowed one of her nieces, her scumbag nieces, to rent from her and paid her as an investment property. Well, she lied to banks, she lied to mortgage companies, she lied to insurance companies about this because she wanted better rates. And guess what? When you lie to mortgage companies to get better rates, you create risk for the entire mortgage system. We saw this with the mortgage crisis back in 2008 when we had a lot of people lie about their income, lie about the use of their properties. They got better rates, and then our housing market imploded and caused a financial crisis. Well, Big Tish got caught lying about this mortgage down in Virginia. She said it was a second home when it was an investment property, and so she got indicted, right? This Democrat-dominated grand jury found the evidence overwhelming enough to indict her. And you have, again, this Obama judge teaming up with this Clinton judge and misreading federal law, creating a conflict between the branches, a constitutional conflict when you're supposed to avoid constitutional conflicts when you're interpreting statutes, and essentially said that the president and the attorney general can only pick their interim U.S. attorney for 120 days. And after that, it's these Democrat judges who get to control the U.S. attorney's office for the rest of President Trump's term. That is utterly insane. This will get reversed on appeal. But in the meantime, they have sabotaged, these Democrat judges have sabotaged these righteous prosecutions of James Comey and Tish James. And this is why I've said all along, these are the appetizer indictments, Ben. We need to get to the main course, and the main course is the conspiracy against rights down in Fort Pierce, Florida. That grand jury is going to get impaneled in January. And I'd say to these lawfare Democrats, you better lawyer up, because justice is definitely coming. I'm going to make damn sure that happens.
So yes, would you mind, just for a simpleton like me, explaining like you would to a very loyal Labrador, but somebody who just, is gonna need a little explanation. Why is it that they can rule, that James Comey can argue and the judge can side with James Comey that Lindsay Halligan is only a private citizen and is not actually a representative of the DOJ or the Trump administration?
It is a misinterpretation of federal statutes that creates a conflict, and it violates the separation of powers. These judges think that they can read a statute that allows concurrently the attorney general and or the courts to appoint U.S. attorneys when there are vacancies, but you defer to the attorney general's pick when there are vacancies. You can't have the courts say we're gonna toss out the president and the attorney general's interim U.S. attorney and put in our own. There are elections in this country, and elections matter. We elect a president of the United States, and he gets to have a team who helps him carry out his executive functions under Article 2 of the Constitution. And you defer to the president's pick for his teams, right? Subject to Senate confirmation, but for these interim picks, you defer to the president. The courts would only step in when there's not a presidential or an AG pick. And what these Democrat judges are doing is they don't like the president and the attorney general's picks because they have a policy disagreement with the American people, and the American people elected the president to end this lawfare and bring accountability. And so these Democrats judges and these Democrats districts are trying to sabotage that because they want to put in a U.S. attorney, for example, in New Jersey, that will do the Democrats' bidding instead of Alina Habba, who will carry out the president's electoral mandate. They want a U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia who's controlled opposition by the Democrats instead of someone who is a bold and fearless warrior like Lindsay Halligan. This is a big problem. It's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court is going to have to step up and fix this because this is unacceptable that these corrupt Democrat politicians and other operatives can get away with their obvious crimes for which Democrat-controlled grand juries found there's probable cause to move forward.
So how does this look from a landscape perspective and moving forward? So the appeal goes directly to the Supreme Court now?
No, the appeal goes to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is controlled by Democrats, including this Chief Judge Diaz, who hand-selected the Clinton judge in South Carolina to get rid of these two indictments against these Democrat politicians. Look, the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court needs to come to this realization that these Democrat judges appointed by Obama, Biden, even Clinton are Democrat operatives in robes. They don't like the fact that the American people elected President Trump in this last election. And so they're doing everything they can to sabotage the president of the United States, sabotage the will of the American people. And the federal judiciary is going to lose its legitimacy and lose it very fast. And when the federal judiciary loses its legitimacy, it loses everything. It does not have an army to enforce its orders. And when it loses its legitimacy, that's when that's when the American people start demanding that Congress do something about it, whether that is cutting the federal judiciary's funding, whether that means cutting judicial seats, just eliminating judicial seats. And so you get rid of these judges by elimination, by holding aggressive oversight hearings, by holding impeachment hearings. There has to be accountability for these rogue Democrats judges, these rogue politicians in rogue robes who are sabotaging the will of the American people. It is a red line. It's unacceptable. It cannot continue to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think back when Colorado threw Donald Trump off the ballot that would be a wake-up call. Was that 9-0 at the Supreme Court? It's like there's been so many wake-up calls. Donald Trump getting the National Guard thrown out of Washington, D.C. Like, don't have the right to, I mean, we don't have a chief executive, frankly, if he can't be commander-in-chief and order the National Guard. We don't have a chief executive if he can't appoint prosecutors. And then, of course, you have what's happening in Texas right now, which is also just wild. The Republican judge that Ted Cruz appointed and nominated is now striking down the electoral maps in Texas. What's your read on that, Mike?
It's unbelievable that I don't know why Ted Cruz thought it would be a good idea to pick this judge, to recommend this judge. And again, we have this process, the blue slip process, which is this bogus process that's been going on for over 100 years, where these home state senators have veto power over nominations for U.S. attorney, U.S. district judge, U.S. marshal. So these senators have too much power as it relates to picking these spots, particularly when you're talking about like a U.S. attorney and a U.S. marshal, who are Article II officers who are working for the president of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States, and they can't do this. They can't do their jobs. You have Pam Bondi who has U.S. attorneys who are appointed by Democrat judges who she has to pull their teeth to get them to do anything. It's unacceptable that this is happening in our country. This is an intentional misreading of the statutes to give Democrats more power and to protect their own corrupt officials.
What's going to happen in Texas? That was a big one, where this judge, this Ted Cruz appointed judge, struck down the constitutional reapportionment that has, of course, under all rights of the governor and the House and the Senate there in Texas, was passed and ratified. This seems like the perfect representation of the people and the will of Texas. This went through without any problems, without any real major political consternation. A couple Democrats cried about it and flew to a much more gerrymandered state like Illinois to protest it. And it was all comical and farcical and silly and stupid. And then a Republican, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump appointed judge goes and strikes it down. Like, what's going to happen there, Mike?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And you have Fifth Circuit Judge Jerry Smith, who was on this 3-judge panel, who wrote this scathing dissent, how this Ted Cruz judge played the process, misrepresented what he was doing, misrepresented his position, didn't let Judge Smith get out his dissent when they put out the opinion. It's just unbelievable. I don't know what's going on with Ted Cruz lately. He's picking this judges like this terrible judge, and Ted Cruz is also pushing this AI amnesty for these big tech oligarchs so they can harm conservatives, communities, children, creators, so they can get amnesty, federal amnesty for AI oligarchs. I think Ted Cruz needs to come back to the conservative wing of the Republican Party instead of doing these AI oligarchs bidding, instead of picking these terrible judges who are going to hand 5 House seats to the Democrats, hand control of the House of Representatives to the Democrats so they can impeach President Trump and make the last 2 years of his administration living hell.
I know Alito has put a stay on that. What do you think is going to happen there?
I think the Supreme Court, Justice Alito has stayed this decision until the Supreme Court rules. I think the Supreme Court is going to side with Texas and say that they absolutely had the right to do what they did. But the bigger problem is how is Ted Cruz picking judges like this who would come to these
Yeah.
just absolutely lawless, head scratching rulings that it would have been so damaging to our conservative cause? Why is Ted Cruz pushing AI amnesty for these big tech oligarchs? Again, Ted Cruz needs to figure out who he wants to be when he grows up and become that person. Does he want to run as a moderate Republican, a pro big tech Republican for president when he runs against JD, or does he want to run as a conservative Republican? It's not looking good for Ted Cruz right now.
Yeah, I think we all know what's going on there. Obviously, he wants Trump to lose the midterms and to get impeached, and he wants JD to be damaged so that he can run for president. It's like pretty plain and obvious. But it's terrible for the country, and you wish more people stood up against it. And I guess, Mike, that's why we're glad we have you standing up against it in the most important arena, which, as you've alluded to, the Southern District of Florida here is going to be a huge case, the grand conspiracy case. We've been hearing little drummings of this, little like you've been placing a breadcrumb trail for us for a while.
3 years, just 3 years, Ben.
For just 3 years.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get this question every single time you're on. What is the update there from Jason Redding Quinones and his team in Florida?
Jason Redding Quinones is a good friend of mine. I recommended him for the Trump U.S. attorney position in the Southern District of Florida in Miami. President Trump listened to my advice during the transition. I pushed very hard and got him confirmed. And I have Jason Redding Quinones is the perfect guy for this job. He comes from a family of Cuban refugees. He comes from a working class, blue collar background like me. He is bold and fearless, and his family escaped politicized and weaponized intel agencies and law enforcement in Cuba. So I think it's in Jason's DNA that when Democrats politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement in America, that's a very bad thing, because where did the Cubans and other refugees go if America falls to these Marxists? And so Jason motioned the court to open a new grand jury in both Fort Lauderdale and Fort Pierce, Florida, according to the court's order that was granted. And those grand juries are going to be impaneled in January. And I have pushed very publicly since the Mar-a-Lago raid more than 3 years ago for a criminal investigation, a grand jury in Fort Pierce to investigate all of this Democrats' lawfare, this weaponization of intel agencies and law enforcement to go after Trump, his top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who went to the clink, Jeff Clark, who's getting disbarred, his supporters on January 6th, who were persecuted under the Supreme Court's Fisher decision. This is unacceptable. These lawfare Democrats took our country to the brink. This is an ongoing criminal conspiracy for the last 8 years. Covering up the conspiracy continues. The conspiracy, there's no statutes of limitations problem. And I'm going to push very publicly over the next 3 years for these lawfare Democrats to be held accountable. And that means severe legal, political, and financial consequences. Again, I've been saying this almost every day since the Mar-a-Lago raid more than 3 years ago. The Democrats made me and you, Ben, a front and center election issue, saying that this is what they're going to promise to do. And the American people liked what they heard. And so 312 electoral votes, all 7 swing states, the popular vote, kept the House, won a comfortable margin in the Senate. President Trump and his team have an electoral mandate to make sure that these lawfare Democrats are held accountable, and that includes putting them in prison.
I never regret doing this, Mike. So James Comey was out last night. We don't need to play the clip, but just you can pop it up as a play beside. Out last night, another creepy ISIS Joseph A. Banks hostage video where he's bragging. He's bragging that you were wrong and that he was right, and that this got thrown out. What's your message to James?
I would say to James Comey, I've thought all along you're going to have Democrat judges colluding to protect the lawfare Democrats, to protect the deep states. Those were the appetizer indictments in the Eastern District of Virginia. Those appetizers got sent back because someone said that the appetizers weren't good enough, but they're going to come back. You're going to get appetizers shoved down your throat, James Comey and Big Tish James, and then you're going to have the main
Probably
course
like
shoved
that.
down your. Yeah, exactly. You're going to have the main course shoved down your throats with indictments in the Southern District of Florida for this lawfare and weaponization. I'm going to make damn sure that happens.
There's one thing that you know from watching Mike Davis for nigh on 4 years on this program. One of our very first guests was Mike Davis in his thousands and thousands of media hits, is that this man doesn't lie. And when this man makes a threat, he's going to follow through on it. And he's made lots of threats on this program, and he was laughed at and mocked and ridiculed in the media, salacious headlines, and everyone thinking that Mike was just insane. And it sounds, and has been proven soundly, that Mike Davis was actually the only one who knew what he was talking about. So you should listen to him. He's actually the only one who could properly predict the future. He does so here at the Article 3 Project. Here's their webpage, Article 3 Project. And here's Mike's X account, obviously followed by 500,000 people. Follow Mike Davis. Godspeed, Mike.
Thank you, Ben.